There's so many problems and concerns, I don't even know where to start. My friends, in this video you can see US Marines deploying missile launchers on a little island close to the southern tip of Taiwan. Their role is essentially maritime denial operations. Meanwhile, another platoon of Marines took up positions around the airfield. Helicopters lowered dozens more troops onto this remote island, their pockets filled with crayons and glue. These men belong to the 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment, a new unit created to prepare the US Marine Corps for war against China. That's when most Marines will ask, what the Turk does littoral even mean? It essentially means coastal. You see, the US Marine Corps' role has traditionally been an offensive force, known for head-on amphibious landings. But a potential conflict with the Chinese military will change everything, like going from recruit mode to veteran. Therefore, the USMC announced the Force Design 2030 initiative. As part of this reform, Marine Littoral Regiments will be the first to jump into battle, where they will have to defend remote islands, while leveraging precision fires, mobility, and speed to slow down enemy advances. That way they can allow the bulk of friendly forces to regroup and counterattack. Essentially, they will play the role of Marine recon units and first responders, but with big, fancy, high-tech weapons. Benjamin Jensen, a professor at the Marine Corps University, summarized it as smaller, more nimble units that would act as 21st century littoral cavalry. But that's also part of the problem. If the USMC doesn't think this through, the troops inside these new regiments might really end up being
the few.
If poorly supported, I fear they might end up cornered like Lieutenant Colonel Custer at Little Big Horn, but this time the natives will have more firepower. So in this video we'll explore Marine Littoral Regiments, their unique mission, their new firepower assets, and we'll end with me ranting as I raise concerns about this new type of unit. On June 6, 1944, brave men stormed Utah Beach. Their watches submerged in water, every second mattered. To pay tribute to their sacrifice, President's Watches proudly presents the D-Day 2025 collection. The first one is the limited edition Neptune 44. It was forged by time and tide. To make this watch, Presidents went to Utah Beach. Once there, the team secured the watch cases in oyster nets and left them faced with the same exact elements that the Allies have encountered on their landing. Salt, water, sand, and sun work in unison to scar, shape, and darken each case. This is not decoration, this is transformation by exposure. You'll have history right on your wrist. In commemoration of the 81st anniversary of D-Day, there's also the very popular Utah Beach A11 Mark II. Once again, a rugged watch built for remembrance. Presidents collected sand to apply directly onto their new bronze watch. And then there's the special Higgins boat blue dial in stainless steel, inspired by the legendary landing craft that carried men into history. These aren't just watches, they're history on your wrist. But those are limited editions, so order now at presidents.com before they're gone. Link is in the description below. As you know, during World War II, the US Marine Corps spearheaded island-hopping campaigns across the Pacific in daring amphibious assaults. After the war, Marines continued to serve as America's expeditionary shock force, executing rapid offensive operations from Korea's Incheon landing to counterinsurgency missions in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Whenever the fighting was expected to get ugly, you called the Marines. In the early 1980s, the Marine Corps formalized the structure and designation of the Marine Expeditionary Unit. A battalion-sized Marine Air-Ground Task Force embarked aboard Navy ships, serving as a forward-deployed quick reaction force. The MU is the smallest MAGTF unit type and is designed primarily for traditional amphibious assault missions. However, the new model outlined in the 2018 National Defense Strategy and Force Design 2030 refers to a warfighting approach where a layer of forces is established to deter and resist an invasion. During this process, the US Marine Corps also retired its tank battalions and drastically reduced its artillery cannon batteries. The USMC needed new lightweight units that would use the double time perk to sprint into contested zones and establish forward presence, and have enough firepower to contain enemy forces. The 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment, or MLR, was officially activated on the 3rd of March 2022 at Marine Corps Base Hawaii. It was redesignating and restructuring the existing 3rd Marine Regiment. The creation of the 3rd MLR marked the beginning of the Marine Corps' shift under Force Design 2030 towards smaller, more agile units optimized for contested coastal environments, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. The next year, in 2023, the 12th Artillery Marine Regiment was redesignated as the 12th Marine Littoral Regiment at Camp Henson in Okinawa, Japan. A third unit, the 4th Marine Regiment, is scheduled to be redesignated as early as 2027, just in time for the big fireworks. That means all 3 regiments of the 3rd Marine Division, the Fighting Third, have gone through this restructuring and redesignation. It's also not a surprise that the 3rd Marine Division is headquartered in Okinawa, right next to the expected engagement area. Okay, so what's so different about these new units? Each Marine Littoral Regiment is composed of 2,500 personnel, distributed within a Littoral Combat Team, an Anti-Air Battalion, and a Logistics Battalion. As you can see, it's a very different structure than the regular Marine Infantry regiments. The Littoral Combat Team is composed of 3 rifle companies. Yes, you heard that right. Companies. I could rant now, but I'll just keep it for the end. So 3 rifle companies, plus a headquarters and service company. But the heart of this formation is the medium-range missile battery. Its HIMARS will provide the regiment's primary striking power. That's how they will sink all incoming PLA warships, one after the other. Yeah, at least in theory. In reality, the HIMARS fielded are currently incapable of anti-ship missions. Even worse, during the Palikatan 23 exercise, the HIMARS missed all of its 6 shots against a slowly drifting decommissioned warship just 20 kilometers away. What a disaster! The new MLRs were up to a bad start. In response, the missile battery of the 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment has adopted the Nemesis, or Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System. Behind this fancy acronym, we're talking about a lightweight setup, 2 naval strike missiles mounted on the chassis of a joint light tactical vehicle. But don't worry, you can equip Marines with fancy missile launchers, but the operators will still act as Marines. Mark my words, before the Chinese arrive, they'll organize Nemesis jousting tournaments. Anyway, the Naval Strike Missile is a subsonic anti-ship missile featuring an operational range of approximately 250 kilometers. That means that from Itbayat Island, Nemesis missile batteries can target any PLA warship trying to pass through the Luzon Strait, that body of water separating Taiwan from the Philippines. That means that the Chinese will not be able to encircle Taiwan, and it will greatly restrict their room for maneuver. So essentially, Marine Littoral Regiments will protect the flanks and rears of Taiwan, just like they would do with their Barrack Bunny. The Nemesis guidance system relies on a combination of inertial GPS and terrain reference navigation, supplemented by imaging infrared homing. Since 2012, this highly potent medium-range anti-ship missile has been in service with multiple NATO countries, mainly as a ship-based missile. The NSM is essentially an upgraded Harpoon missile with double the range but only half the weight and a whole meter shorter. Now, each medium-range battery consists of 2 platoons, each with 3 sections, and each section has 3 Nemesis. Therefore, each MLR has a total of 18 Nemesis at its disposal, with 36 mounted naval strike missiles ready to fire. This is more than double the anti-ship missile capacity of the USN Constellation-class frigate in development, which is expected to carry 16 NSMs. And the advantage of the Nemesis is that they can be dispersed and concealed, unlike a warship. So even if some missile launchers or vehicles get hit, the battery can keep firing. Disclaimer, the 12th Marine Littoral Regiment still uses some HIMARS, but it's a long story and we won't get into that. The 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment also has an anti-air battalion. Its task is to provide air defense, air surveillance and early warning, as well as air control for these missile launchers. For air defense, the Marine Air Defense Integrated System debuted with the 3rd MLR in Balikatan 25. The MADA system is mounted on a GLTV and consists of 2 variants which work as a complementary pair within a section. The Mark I is armed with Stinger missiles and a 30mm cannon on its remote weapon station. On the other hand, the Mark II is optimized for counter-UAS missions and houses the RPS-62 S-band radar system, along with C2 functions for the entire section. The 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment will also be equipped with some medium-range intercept capability batteries. The Emmerich is the result of a fusion between US radars and Israeli Iron Dome missiles and software developed by Rafael. Sky Hunter is the name of the Raytheon licensed production version of Rafael's Tamir Sam, which is part of the Israeli Iron Dome system. The missile has a range of 70 kilometers, or over 8 times the maximum range of a Stinger. The US Marine Corps aims to use the system for protection against primarily cruise missiles, but also drones and various rockets. However, it lacks the anti-ballistic missile capacity that Patriot batteries have. Nevertheless, it fills the gap inside the MLR's air defense network. It's part of an integrated system. That means that the Marine Littoral Regiments should also be supported by US Navy warships. At last, ANTPS-80s will take care of surveillance and early warning. These radars can feed information via data link to the wider Indo-PACOM network and improve situational awareness for all surrounding friendly units. That's very important. That means MLRs can strike enemy warships, but they will also act as DIs, the forward observers of the entire US military. As for the Marine riflemen inside these littoral combat teams, well, don't tell them, but essentially the role will be to guard and protect all these missile launchers, radars, and air defense batteries. I also noticed that the combat team fielded a great number of machine guns and snipers. To me, this demonstrates that the role is to maximize firepower with a small number of troops and engage targets from afar. The LCT has also been experimenting with the implementation of various new lightweight aerial drones for ISR operations. There's the RQ-20 Puma fixed-wing hand-launched UAV with a range of up to 60 kilometers and the VX-E30 Stalker's VTOL propeller-powered UAV with a range of up to 100 kilometers. They also use a number of Skydio X2D, essentially the US equivalent of the DJI Mavic. Before we move on to my rant, what exactly is the mission of Marine Littoral Regiments? Especially since now that we know the type of weapons that they will be fielding. Under Force Design 2030, the US Marine Corps organizes its global operations into 4 layers: Contact, Blunt, Surge, and Homeland. In this video, we'll focus on the first 2 because Marine Littoral Regiments primarily operate within the Contact and Blunt layers. The Contact layer focuses on operations within the gray zone during peacetime to lay groundwork in case of an armed conflict and deter any armed aggression. This is where we're at right now. Meanwhile, the Blunt layer is designed to delay, degrade, or deny initial armed aggression. Essentially, once shit hits the fan. The 3rd MLR has already been engaged in Contact layer operations in the past 2 years. It has made at least 5 tours to the Philippines and spent months on the ground so far. During the deployments, units of the 3rd MLR completed physical reconnaissance of the islands south of Taiwan along the Luzon Strait. Among the islands in the strait are the Batanes Archipelago and Babuyan Islands. Now, how do they plan on securing so many remote islands? Well, check out this video.
The US and Filipino Armed Forces flew from Burgos to Fuga Island, from Fuga Island to Calayan Island to Bosco Island, and then from Bosco back to Burgos in Ilocos Norte within a span of 4 days.
If we look on the map, this was their entire itinerary. A total of 500 kilometers within 4 days. It's pretty exhausting if you ask me. And from what I understood, this is what they'll do, just keep moving over and over again. The tasks of the 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment included taking records of potential air and amphibious landing sites, studying ports and transport infrastructure capacity, and scouting for food and water sources. The Marines repeated similar operations in Balikatan 25 this year. This effectively illustrates contact layer operations during peacetime. As part of the exercise, infantry companies of the 3rd MLR and the Philippine Marine Corps Coastal Defense Regiment also rehearsed air assaults and airfield seizures to gain island footholds. I guess. You know what? I'll just keep it for the end. During Balikatan 24, units of the 3rd MLR deployed to the Itbayat and Mavudis Islands. Itbayat Island is part of the Batanes Archipelago and has an area of 80 square kilometers, about half the size of Staten Island in New York. Mavudis is located 12 kilometers further to the north and covers an area of less than 1 square kilometer, or equivalent to the size of Governor's Island in New York. I'm using simple tools of comparison so that our fellow Marines don't lose focus. Apart from Itbayat and Mavudis Islands, There are another two major potential targets for the Marines in the case of an armed confrontation between the US and China over Taiwan. Orchid Island, located 150 kilometers north of Itbayat and 65 kilometers off the southern end of Taiwan. Meanwhile, 70 kilometers further to the north is Green Island, which stands 30 kilometers east of the coast of Taitung City. Both these islands belong to Taiwan and have a civilian airfield with an airstrip of just over 1 kilometer in length. If you remember, we mentioned these two islands in one of my previous videos and how strategic they are for the defense of Taiwan. Then they can also disembark some special forces on Orchid Island, located 65 kilometers off the coast of Taiwan, as well as on Green Island, 30 kilometers from the coast. In the end, securing this entire chain of islands will be crucial for the US military. According to the USMC, the Marine Littoral Regiment will be able to coordinate air and missile defense, boost maritime domain awareness, and support naval strike and information warfare operations by seizing key islands and deploying anti-access area denial bubbles. Thus, these Marine Littoral Regiments should be able to disrupt PLA movements south of Taiwan and potentially derail any amphibious assault before it begins. Okay, now's the time to be real about these Marine Littoral Regiments. There's so many problems and concerns, I don't even know where to start. First of all, you heard it, they will only be deployed once the fighting starts. But by then, it might already be too late. Chinese forces might already be in control of these key islands. Next, even if the Marines do get on the islands before the Chinese, the risk is for them to be cut off and encircled on these remote islands. We know that the PLA has consistently established exercise zones on this island hopping route throughout the previous military exercises around Taiwan. It most certainly anticipates this exact scenario to be played out. I don't know, maybe I'm just pessimistic, but I'm not very confident in the US Marine Corps' plan. I mean, just think about it. The Chinese Navy could overwhelm these islands with hundreds, thousands of fishing vessels, secretly filled with special forces and UAVs that would then swarm these islands. Which leads us to problem number 3. The 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment has been reduced from 3,400 Marines and sailors to just 2,500 personnel, and is now composed of only 3 rifle companies. 3 companies, that's 600 infantry, to defend a dozen of islands. That's an average of 50 dudes per island. The moment PLA forces get up close, the Marines won't stand a chance. GG, well played. And forget any plans for evacuation, because there will be none. It's all dependent on helicopters in a contested area that will be filled with hundreds of enemy missiles and rockets. We know how many US helicopters got destroyed in Afghanistan by simple RPGs. Now imagine the same situation against an enemy with 1,000 times more firepower. What could possibly go wrong? I really fear that these Marines will end up in a last stand like Custer and his men. This means the Marine Littoral Regiments have no other choice but to keep the enemy at a distance. And to do so, they will need to fire at will, and thus expend a lot of ammunition. But did you notice how their Nemesis missile launchers can only fire 2 missiles at a time? That's potentially all that they will be able to fire in the middle of a battle. Mark Kansian, a former colonel in the Marine Corps, ran a war game that involved the Marines conducting island hopping operations. He raised concerns such as the risk of an early depletion of anti-ship missiles, or how the MLRs could remain cut off from supplies within the PLA's defensive bubble. Honestly, I don't know how these Marine Littoral Regiments will get resupplied in such conditions. They do have helicopters, but they're very vulnerable and have significantly lower load capacity compared to surface vessels. So a possible adaptation would be to utilize LSMs for initial deployment and stockpiling of supplies. Actually, yes, stockpiling more ammunition could solve the problem. But that would be too easy, right? According to CSIS, China has more sensors across all domains in the South China Sea than the US, giving the PLA a formidable regional targeting advantage. The US would have to expend an unacceptable amount of ordnance to degrade those capabilities. Dispersion and concealment could help enhance survivability. But even so, how are you supposed to conceal an entire regiment on small islands the size of a... With China's edge in ISR capacity, vehicles are easily detectable due to their infrared signatures in isolated geographical areas with minimal human presence. Units must therefore remain mobile under the constant risk of being spotted and targeted. So that's why the 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment kept jumping from one island to another. Spoilers, it will be as lethal as playing hide and seek in Squid Game. There's a great risk that these Marine Littoral Regiments will be sitting ducks. To avoid that, they have been rehearsing tactics to communicate while remaining hidden, such as creating a lot of noise in the electromagnetic spectrum. What? Americans required to communicate discreetly? Mission impossible, bro. Under this environment, mobility is a critical factor of survivability. Yes, you can move units around the map, but what about the large munition stockpiles? And we're back to square one. So either the Marine Littoral Regiments remain mobile, but with low ammo supplies, or they stock up on ammo, become much slower and more visible, thus turning into sitting ducks. Here's what I think. These Marine Littoral Regiments would be the most effective if they were already on these islands when the war starts. That way they can already position all their missile launchers, radars, and air defense batteries. Ideally, they can also dig in and build underground facilities. That's the only way to make sense of the Marine Littoral Regiments. And if the Americans want to be cheeky and troll the PLA, they can deploy these Marine Littoral Regiments right in China's face, on these islands that belong to Taiwan just a couple kilometers off the mainland. We're talking about Matsu, Kinmen, and Penghu. Their role would be like the light infantry that defended the various farms at Waterloo, cause chaos, inflict as many casualties as possible, and disrupt any coordinated enemy assault operations. A little big horn, but with more aura. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links will be in the description below.